Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us today, and thanks to everybody online as well for joining in our second engaged research seminar. It's cleverly titled "Cloudy with the Chance of Pain," as you can see on the screen. We're delighted to welcome Professor Will Dixon here today from the University of Manchester. Will is a rheumatologist and Professor of Digital Epidemiology and the Director of the Centre for Epidemiology versus Arthritis. His research is focused on using digital health data for population health research, collected from both clinicians and patients. He is also a touring fellow and a co-director of the International Centre for Translation Research in Digital Pain and digital health, across the Universities of Manchester, Melbourne, and Toronto. Today he's going to speak about UK's largest virtual study investigating if weather influences pain and how citizen science has helped enable the success of his work. So thank you very much. Over to you.
Well, thanks very much for the introduction. And Emma, thanks for the invitation to come and speak. It's a real pleasure to be here. I'm trying to sort of put the camera in the right place. And everyone can hear me online okay? Can they see the slides? Yeah, okay, great. So I'm going to start by introducing myself and introducing the project, Cloudy with the Chance of Pain. But Emma was particularly interested in the patient and public involvement and engagement aspects of the study. So that's what I'm going to focus on. We could talk about the study design or the results, but we'll talk about the PPIE. So I'm a rheumatologist and an epidemiologist. So I spend a day a week working in the hospital, looking after people with arthritis, 4 days at the university studying the causes and consequences of diseases in populations. And these two roles are really complementary. So being in clinic, I get to understand the sort of questions that patients have, things that matter to them, such as why did I get this disease? What does the future hold for me now that I've got this condition? What's the best treatment? And then we can answer those questions using epidemiology, so collecting data from people and then feeding those results back into the clinic. Now, my title is a professor of digital epidemiology, and so I tend to use digital data sources to answer those epidemiological questions. And the digital data source that we're most used to in epidemiology is electronic health records. So these are used primarily to direct people's clinical care. So if you go and see your GP, they'll be taking notes on a computer. But if we can de-identify those and collate them across populations, then we can analyze them and answer some of those questions. But the data sources are now increasingly expanding, and we're starting to think about how we can use these for health research as well. And the one that I'm going to focus on today is the use of smartphones for population health research, kind of as told through this one study of Cloudy with a Chance of Pain. So this is a cartoon of me or somebody like me in the outpatient clinic asking patients how they've been recently. And almost every clinic, somebody will tell me, or perhaps more than one person, that they've been worse. What with this recent weather? Interestingly, if you then say, well, what is it about the weather that makes your pain worse? You get often a range of answers. It's the rain, it's the cold, and somebody always says, it's this miserable weather and please can I have a prescription to move to Spain. Now, this belief about a relationship between weather and pain has been around a very long time. And in fact, in prior research, it's been shown that about 4 in every 5 people who have arthritis believe that there's a relationship between the weather and pain. Over half of those people believe that they can forecast the weather based on their symptoms. And yet, despite lots of people trying to work out this relationship, there's no consensus in the literature about what the nature of this relationship is. And so now, having been thinking about it, I kind of watch out for this in my everyday life. And if you watch Paddington, Mrs. Bird comes into the kitchen and says, oh, I can tell it's going to rain because I can feel it in my hip. Why is there no consensus from prior research? Well, it's actually a really difficult question to answer. Previous studies have often had small numbers of people who have a range of different health conditions. The studies are often cross-sectional, so they're just asking in one moment of time. And of course, you're not exposed to a range of the weather then, it's just the weather on that day. If they do follow people up through time, it's often over short periods of time. You need to have accurate weather data, so the weather that people are exposed to. And studies have often made assumptions that you are where your postcode is rather than where you are actually at the time of your symptoms. And then even if you have longitudinal data and accurate weather data, then the analysis is very difficult, because are you talking about weather in terms of the absolute values, the change in the weather, the change from, from what day to which day? Is there a threshold beyond which this will happen? Is there a lag effect? Is it today's weather or yesterday's or the days before? So it's quite a hard thing to study. So if we kind of park the weather problem for now, there was this emerging opportunity of using new data sources for health research. And when we began this study, we were starting to think about how we might use smartphones for health research. And now 9 in every 10 people own a smartphone. Smartphones provide a wide range of opportunities. So you can collect things that you would have collected on paper, but via a touch screen. But you can collect a whole load of different types of data as well, and I'll show that in the next slide. You can collect time series data, so understanding how things change day to day rather than just whenever somebody comes to the hospital clinic once every 6 months. Because 9 in 10 people own a smartphone, you can reach large proportions of the population without anyone needing to turn up for a clinic visit. Through those same screens in which you can collect data, you can pass information back to people and keep them engaged through time. And then we can also rethink how we do study designs. We can do analyses within individuals, and I'll just touch on that later, and new types of analysis. So you'll all recognize the picture of the smartphone hosting a range of different apps. Here's one health app for monitoring rheumatoid arthritis. So you can see somebody can self-report where their tender and swollen joints are. But the phone's a bit like a Swiss Army knife in that it contains a whole load of other technology rather than just a touchscreen. It has an accelerometer and a gyroscope built into it that allows the phone's movement to be measured, and you can convert that into other things, such as here a step count. It can differentiate between different types of activity. And the icon at the top right there, that's the GPS, the Global Positioning System, allowing your phone to know where in the world you are. And that can link to other data and provide useful information, such that you know it's another cold and miserable day in Manchester. So given those opportunities, we had this idea several years ago now of running this study called Cloudy with a Chance of Pain, where we were interested in tracking pain symptoms through time, as well as some other symptoms, but then using the GPS within the phone to link to the local weather station, wherever somebody was and wherever they were moving within the country. And then you had the ingredients that you needed to solve that problem that's been around for a very long time. So the benefits, as I've kind of suggested generically, but for this study, we could, in theory, recruit large numbers of people. We could track their daily symptoms. We could access their local weather data. We could follow them up through seasons, allowing us to address the problem. The downside, though, was that we didn't have any experience at all of running a health study using smartphones, but then neither did anyone else at that time. So we thought we might as well have a go. Now, the next slide is about factors that influence people's engagement with health research. And it didn't really fit kind of perfectly in the flow of the story anywhere, but I don't think we knew of this paper when we started the study. I'm not sure exactly when we discovered it, but I think it's useful to sort of show you this now, because you'll see themes from this that repeat through the rest of the talk. So factors affecting engagement, we're thinking about engagement, people actively participating in research, but then also their ongoing engagement through time. So some factors that will affect it are people's own characteristics, such as their age, gender, are they early adopters or not of technology? There are things that relate to how you design your study and how it's set up. So the level of information that you provide to people, how easy it is to onboard people or get them to enroll in the study, how burdensome it is to enter information, and how frequently you're asking them to do that. There are things related to the conduct of the study. So are there personal advantages to taking part? Are there advantages for the wider population and altruism? Do you get feedback or encouragement for participating? Are there networking effects? So does it connect you to other people who have a similar view on life? Can you build the community? Do you provide peer support? There are kind of push factors, so personal or virtual contact. And then there are things related to the technology. So how easy is it to use? How easy it is to integrate into your daily life? And then lastly, kind of a miscellaneous other stuff, external events that might affect your engagement through time. And actually, we've kind of found this structure really helpful as we've thought about this, and then other things once we discovered the kind of framework. So that's a little bit about the kind of idea of the study. But now I'm going to kind of take you through our patient public involvement and engagement through the life course of running Cloudy with a Chance of Pain. So it began in 2015 when we submitted the idea for funding, and it was funded through the MRC's Confidence in Concept scheme, the second round of that. I'd met the founder of this company called UManchester at an event in London. So they had an existing smartphone app for tracking symptoms. And it was designed like a flower, so 10 petals, and you could toggle each petal in and out to score things on a regular basis. But we wanted to make sure that it was fit for purpose for what we wanted to do. So we refined and configured their existing application together with patients. And then we tested its feasibility and acceptability over 3 months. So really just piloting whether it would do what we wanted it to do. But the patient involvement was really important here. And had we not done that, we would have gone quite wrong, I think. So we established a patient and public involvement group who were dedicated to this project. And in the pilot stage, it was really set up to help us inform the design of this user interface and to help with us thinking through that pilot stage of 20 patients. But then the PPI group stayed with us through then what became the bigger main stage of the study. And there they helped contribute to the main study objectives as we submitted that for funding. They helped with launching the study, keeping people engaged through time, helped us interpret and the findings and present that back to the public. And you'll see examples of all of those through the talk. So informing the design, we were fixed with the motif, but we were flexible in terms of the wording and in which direction did the motif go. UManchester had the idea as they designed this that if you were well, you would have a full flower. And so they put no pain, out to 5. So if you were well, your pain petal would be full. But the patient said to us, that doesn't make any sense to us, because you continue to ask us, how bad's your pain on a scale of 0 to 10? So high pain should be the full one. So we had to kind of go against the philosophy of what UManchester had, but it made sense to us as researchers and clinicians as well. But we changed that in response to what patients had told us. And then there were kind of 2 further examples here about the wording of things. So we talk about patient global assessment. That wasn't language that really made sense to the patients themselves. And when we were measuring mood, we were using the word depressed, which they didn't like. And so that ultimately got changed. So after that co-design and configuration with the patients, we ended up with the motif. Actually, this is sort of the picture predates because it does use the word depressed here, which we didn't. But ultimately, you got a motif that looks like this. You can see it moving. You got an evening prompt at 6:24 p.m., scientifically proven the best time to ask a question. And then we use the GPS to pull the local weather data. We did interviews and focus groups with patients after they piloted this for 3 months. I should say at this stage that we were also trying to collect all of the raw sensor data out of the phones, because we were also trying to run a kind of parallel study about whether we could use passive measurement of physical activity as a proxy for how well people were. Because as your arthritis gets worse, your patterns of physical activity change, and could we passively monitor people rather than have them track their symptoms every day? So we had a kind of a capture app in the background behind the cloudy U motif screen. At the end of the pilot, patients said that they really liked the design of the app. It was visually appealing. It was quick and simple to use. They understood what they had to do without too much guidance. They were really motivated to take part. They kind of understood the study question and wanted to contribute to it. And I think that's really, really important. I mean, that was vital learning for us. If you want people to participate, they have to kind of understand why and be motivated to take part. And cloud, you know, it's about the weather in the UK. It's people love talking about that. Although 3 out of the 20 people in the pilot didn't believe that there was an association for them, they were also still motivated to find out for other people. So here's a series of quotes from those 20 people. I know myself that weather is a massive factor. Everyone I know has got a smartphone, so if it can improve people's health and their condition and how they're managed, then brilliant. The way I look at it is it will probably help me in the future, but it'll help a lot more people with their symptoms, and especially if it's going through to GPs and consultants. In fact, the other program grant that I run is doing just that. We're integrating the data into the electronic health record. I'm really impressed with it. I think anyone could use it, even people that are not technically minded, which is important. I'm a bit of a nerd, so I'll probably have a look at those graphs to see how I've been scoring during the pilot. And, you know, that's exactly relates to the laws of attrition paper, that if you're getting that feedback, then that's an additional benefit for you. We lost, through the course of 3 months, 6 of the 20 participants, sometimes because of health issues, but more commonly due to the fact that we were draining their battery by trying to pull the raw sensor data, which was clearly a problem for us. But when people did stay in, they entered the data quite well through the course of a 3-month period. And here's a quote about the battery. I just left the phone on the side because the battery kept going out all the time. And that's not a very good measurement of somebody's activity if it's just plugged in next to the kettle. And then at this stage of the pilot study, this is when things kind of took off for us, because the BBC Two's Trust Me, I'm a Doctor programme were looking for health studies that were using people's technology to film for their current series. And the fact that we were live doing the study at the time was great for them. They said that usually they find studies when they're at the ideas phase or that they finish. So finding us actually live, they came to film the pilot, but they also said that we like our viewers to be able to take action at the end of the show. And what could they do if they watched the feature? And for us, this was a pilot study where we kind of thought that we might scale it up, but then it's going to be on national television. So it seemed like a great opportunity to promote the study and advertise it. We didn't at that stage have any funding for the main study. We'd just done it in 20 people. But we did then go to what was then Arthritis Research UK, now Versus Arthritis, and they very generously received a grant application and peer reviewed it outside of their usual funding cycle. And they awarded us money to do Cloudy with a Chance of Pain. One of the patient partners in the PPI group, they then became a co-applicant on that and helped us refine what we said that we do. So then we came to the time of the study launch. We had to work frantically to get everything through ethics and tested. But in January 2016, we featured on Trust Me, I'm a Doctor. And they had that call to action. Chris Van Tulliken did a great job of promoting the study and driving people to our study website. And then a few days later, following the publicity from that, we then were invited onto BBC Breakfast. And I've just got a short video here to show you what happened that morning. Let's see if there's anything else.
7, we'll have the weather forecast from Carol in just a few minutes. But what if those downpours don't only mean you need to remember your umbrellas today?
Because some people think the weather can affect their health. And our researchers want to find out if they're right. They're using a smartphone app to get people to record how they're feeling and then linking it to local weather data.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Breakfast Jane Cubbin has been to find out more for us.
It is so bad when it's at its worst. It is almost has no words to describe it. It's debilitating. It's really at the core of the bone.
Carolyn was diagnosed with arthritis aged just 18.
It's horrible.
Horrible. And you think weather related?
I think that the weather is related to an extent.
But to what extent and why? She's taking part in a study to see if there really is a link between weather and pain.
It's not bad, thank you.
Dr. Will Dixon is asking thousands of sufferers like Carolyn to provide data via their mobile phone.
Crucially, it's how's your pain? Pretty much moderate pain today.
We're asking people to collect their symptoms every day, and then the GPS from their phone automatically collects the weather data where they are, and collectively that brings together a massive data set through time that we can analyse. If we understand the relationship between the weather and pain, then absolutely, then we hope that we'll be able to forecast pain.
It's an age-old theory, but no one really knows which weather prompts the worst symptoms or if there's any predictable pattern. High up on the roof of Manchester's Meteorological Observatory, there's a suspicion that atmospheric pressure is key.
When low pressure hits, what you get is you get this area where you've got the cool air and the warm air interacting, which can lead to a lot of turbulence, a lot of air being pushed up, and basically it upsets the weather. You know, gets it.
Upsets the weather, and for some people it upsets the joints.
Almost every clinic I run, one of my patients will tell me that their joints are better or perhaps worse because of the weather.
Because of the weather. Do you think there could be a day when these pain forecasts are part of national news in the same way that the pollen count is?
Well, very hope.
Take a look at this weather system moving in, raining with it, low pressure and rain. So if you live down in Devon, a weather map of the future, perhaps. But exactly what goes on the map will be determined by the experiences of those who take part in the cloudy with a chance of pain study.
If it's cold and wet, then I'm quite flared up and I get more pain. But equally, if it's hot and humid, I get a flare up as well.
There's so many variables.
There is, yeah.
And what you would like is that bit of certainty to be able to predict.
Definitely, because then I can change sort of my behaviour and activity and manage my life better.
Jamie Cubbin, BBC News.
So I think one of the things that we learned from doing that was about the importance of having patients as partners. And the story being told by Carolyn was much more powerful than me as a researcher saying, we need to do this.
It is not.
So the various different television programs directed people to the study website. We had a video there that told people what the project was all about. I have got that video here, but I think I'm going to just skip over it because it's going to tell you what you've already heard to a large extent. If you were interested after watching the video, then you had to go through a series of eligibility questions. They were really quick and easy to do. So I've had pain and have had it for the last 3 months. I'm age 16 or over. And then people had to go to the App Store, download the app and start tracking their symptoms after filling in their consent. So as we submitted the application, they said, well, how many people do you think you're going to recruit? We had no idea. We thought if we got 1,000, it would be great. If we had 2,000, it would have beaten the largest study of weather and pain that was of questionable quality as well. So that was kind of our moonshot to get 2,000 people. And so after, trust me, I'm a doctor, this is what happened. So this is 2,000. So we'd hit our year-long recruitment target within 4 days. And then after BBC Breakfast, we did this, where we had the unusual problem of vertical recruitment, where we were recruiting 1 person per second. Doesn't often happen in epidemiology. So overall, we recruited over 13,000 people in the UK. We recruited at least 1 person from every single postcode area. And in fact, we'd done that in the first week. And in total, we tracked over 5 million symptom scores. We've tried to do a bit of analysis of that sort of onboarding process of going to the website and then downloading an app from the App Store, and really remarkable conversion rates, I think, in partly because of the help from UMOT for making everything look and feel so good. Here's some responses from social media. So Derek Stewart is a really large patient advocate, and he'd said exceptional innovative research for the public who talk about the effects of weather on health. And then we came to learn about this tweet from DJ Patil. So he is the US chief data scientist with the White House. So this is a study going on in a completely different part of the world, but he'd spotted it and thought it was a great way to take part in health research. So we were all feeling very proud of ourselves at this point, until we went onto the ITV News website. So we'd launched on the BBC, but we were also on ITV News that lunchtime. And instead of driving people to our website, they drove people to their own ITV News website. And then stupidly, I read the comment section. Foolish error. What a waste of taxpayers' money, basically sums it up. And actually, this was really, well, painful initially, but then very helpful. So you probably can't quite read that from there, but I'll blow it up slightly. So this is the first comment. I'm struggling to read it from here as well. So this first comment says, I have fibromyalgia, so of course the weather affects my pain. They could have just asked doctors to confirm that. Of course, I am a doctor, so that was the motivation for doing it. Oh, for goodness sake, everyone knows that cold, damp weather affects adversely aches and pains. What a waste of time and money. They need to get a proper job. Here it says, I'm definitely better when it's warm, but I also seem to have more pain when the weather changes from one to the other. Everyone knows cold makes pain worse. If they need to send me to a hot country for a month to make sure, I will volunteer. I told you there was always one. It's the air pressure that does the damage. Warm weather makes my arthritis worse. And then on this one, anyone with a modicum of sense knows the weather affects illnesses and pain. Scientists doing what they do well, wasting money on worthless tests that benefit nobody. So feeling a bit despondent about that. But then interesting when you kind of look across these various different comments, you know, that everyone knows that the weather makes pain worse. But in the second one, it's cold and damp. In the third one, it's the changes in the weather. In the fourth one, it's the cold. In the fifth, it's the air pressure. And the sixth one, it's the warmth. So everyone knows it. What a ridiculous thing to ask, and yet everyone's posting it something different. But it did really make us think hard about this question of, you know, so what? Why bother? You know, what is our defense to it's just a waste of time? And I think you saw it in the clip there to an extent, but if we understand how the weather affects pain and what ingredients is it in the weather, then that could hand over to other research that can then start to think about future interventions and therapies. And if we can understand the nature of the relationship and knowing that we can forecast the weather, then that could lead to a pain forecast, as suggested, that would allow people to plan their lives better. So if you knew that you were due to have a flare on a Thursday, maybe you do your daily activities earlier on in the week. But I think for us, it also reinforced the need to strongly partner with patients, not just at the launch of the study, but as we got the results. So that's the pilot, the study launch and recruitment, and then let's just move on to the engagement and retention. So in our theory at the beginning, we think that we'll be able to track daily symptoms every day for 6 months or more across seasons. And yet these are industry churn rates for apps, not health apps specifically, but just if somebody downloads an app, how often do people then open it on consecutive days? Only 1 in 3 people will open apps on average on the second day after downloading it. So that's a 31% there. And as you get out to 2 weeks, only 1 in 10 people will have opened the app. So you just lose interest in apps regularly through time and pretty quickly. But we're also aware of that and aware of the need to try and keep people engaged and some of the sort of structure around that. So as we were setting up the study, we thought, what is it that we can do that will keep people engaged through time? So not just get them in, but actually do we sustain their engagement, sustain their entry? So we talked already about the daily prompts. So, you know, the notification that you'll be familiar with via your smartphone to do something. We sent out weekly newsletters to all of our participants. We actually had to employ somebody specifically to go scouring stories of frozen lakes around the country. So interesting weather stories. People shared their pain experiences. So there was a pain story every week. As you heard before, people could see their own graphs within the app. And here's somebody's tweet saying, I became a little bit obsessed with the graphs I'm creating about my pain, my day-to-day chronic pain symptoms for the study. So people really valued this. People said that they could take them into their clinicians and it would influence their care. I think this one probably didn't work as well as we'd hoped it might, but we set up an online community via Health Unlocked, and it allowed people to share their experiences. It already hosts communities of specific health conditions, and everyone here in our community had chronic pain, but a whole range of different reasons for that. So it may be that they were involved elsewhere, but this, I think, didn't really capture people's interest as much as it might have done. We ran a citizen science project within Cloudy, and again, I think it was great fun doing it and really interesting to do it. I think it didn't really help us, but other than for a relative minority of the patients, I think it's because it was really difficult to do actually. But what we did, we partnered with a guy called Jer Thorpe, who's the former artist in residence at the New York Times, and we'd asked him to help us design this. So we wanted people to be able to interact with the data, so not just submit it and lose sight of it, but actually be able to participate. And so they built an interactive 3-dimensional landscape of pain, and I think it was just a bit too hard for people to understand. So you can see here a 2-dimensional graph of one person's symptoms, and then they put multiple people's symptoms back to back such that you got a landscape of pain, and then you could scroll through this pain landscape, and alongside it you could see the landscape of the weather that those people were linked to, and then you could try and spot the patterns and the relationships between them. And then, having had a play with the data, you could then submit your theories or hypotheses about what the relationship was that kind of built up as a question. So there are loads of great things in it. It was engaging to play with, but I don't think it really kind of added to the science. But it did mean that we could take something out to the public, and we went to the citizen, this is the Cheltenham Science Festival, we went to the British Science Festival with these giant touch screens so people could interact with the data that have been submitted across the country. And then we probably took it a bit too far, that we built a virtual landscape, actually a physical object that we had in the Manchester Day Parade outside the town hall. So that was tons of work, and then it poured with rain that day, and we had like soggy sheets for half a day. Okay, so moving on from that, we've sort of said that we tried to maintain people's engagement, but what did it look like? Well, it's hard to measure, hard to report. It's not just like 50% were engaged, because everyone's engagement pattern is different. So here you can see each line represents one person, and a dot on the line is a day in which they entered symptoms. And you can see that, well, bar a few exceptions, no two people are kind of identical. We worked with the Turing Institute, and they, with colleagues there, we did some hidden Markov modeling, identifying periods where people were highly engaged and periods where they were less engaged. So periods of high engagement you see in dark grey, periods of lower engagement in light grey, and then we clustered those patterns into these 4 groups. I think kind of visually you can see it quite easily that people in red are high engagers, they're entering data regularly through many months. There was this group that we call the kind of medium engagers, the low group, and then what we refer to as the tourists, people who came for a day and then kind of cleared off again. Importantly for us in epidemiology, we were interested in, are those people who are contributing more data, are they representative of the wider population? The answer to that was they are broadly, although of course the men were slightly less engaged than the women. When we compared our retention graph, so this is kind of the last day on which they enter data and they get censored, beyond that, compared to that app churn rate, at 2 weeks, we had 2 in 3 people engaged. Remember, at 2 weeks, only 1 in 10 people open an app. We had 6 in 10 still engaged. At 3 months, We had 1/3 of people still tracking, and that 1/3 you'd see after a day in normal labs, so 90 days versus 1 day. And out to 6 months, which is the period that we thought was really pushing the boat out, where we still had about 1 in 5 people tracking every day. Why do people take part? Similar to what you saw in the pilot study, really, taking part is it's opened up to me so many new and fun experiences and to a more realistic and effective management of my condition. So actually doing more than we'd set out to do. I look forward to the results as they're published. I'm finding the graph data fascinating, plus it's great to have a chance to chart my illness in so many ways, giving new information to my rheumatology consultant as all data can be printed off, also extra information for medics, benefits agencies, etc. And then this one's a nice one. As a serial research participant, this was my favourite study so far, so creative and relevant. So we like her. So we created 5.1 million symptom scores, really complex weather data. And so we had to then go, oh God, what are we going to do now? So we sort of spent a year keeping people, recruiting people and keeping them engaged. And then we had to analyze this massive wave of data and sending out a newsletter saying, we thought we'd have the results by now, but actually it's a bit more complicated than we thought. We aim to analyze it in quite an interesting way, actually. So when you live your everyday life and things go up and down, you often think like this, don't you? So you have kind of days when you're well, days when you're perhaps not quite so perky, and then you kind of look back in time and go, well, what is it that I did on that day that I was feeling less well compared to the day that I was well? And, you know, why do I feel like this? And maybe it had something to do with the brown drink versus the green drink. And actually, this is the sort of science that we did in Cloudy, that we were looking at days that were good versus days that were bad, and looking at the exposure in the periods just before those two time periods. And is there a difference between those? And there is a research study design that had been developed about 20 years earlier by a guy called Malcolm McClure in the 90s, a Canadian epidemiologist, who's looking at these within-person analyses in time, initially on a study of sexual activity before heart attacks. But we got in touch with Malcolm because it was a complex analysis, and he joined the study team and helped us work through it. And we identified kind of pain events, so days on which you had an increase in your pain from the previous day compared to no pain event, and we're looking at the weather in those periods beforehand. So we had to have a binary outcome, so these pain events, there was a 2 or more category increase. So if yesterday you'd scored moderate, you would have a pain event if that then increased to very severe pain in this 5-point scale. So over several years, it turned out, we were having these regular analysis meetings with us in Manchester, online with colleagues, and you can see on the left, Malcolm McClure's on the right hand of the screen, and on the left is a guy called Antonio Gasparini from the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine, who's doing the most modern kind of iteration of Malcolm's original methods. So we had like the world's best team helping analyze this. And then we started getting close to the results and started to think, how are we going to get this out there? Because we've had so many people participate, we really wanted to do it justice. Took a lot of communication planning, so building time in for that. I thought I'd better go and do some media training, and it seemed like most of the media training really just sort of taught you how to pull funny faces. We had another go at allowing people to interact with the data, so we built an interactive data map that allowed you to explore the weather in certain parts of the country and compare it to other parts. Again, it was really, despite us trying to make it as easy as possible, it was still quite complicated to use. We developed the press release. I kind of learned how your story for the public has to be completely different from how we tell stories in scientific research. So if I'm writing a paper, I'll do a long preamble about what it is that we know already, what is it that we don't know, leading up to some aims and objectives. Then I'll tell everyone about the methods that we use. And like eventually, if anyone hasn't fallen asleep, you get to the results. When you're putting out a press release, trying to grab people's attention, it's like let's tell us what the result is straight away. And that took quite a lot of getting used to, but we kind of learned that we needed to do it that way. related to having patients tell the story about why this mattered. We pre-prepared this with some of our patients. And this is Anna Birkenhorst, who was a PhD student working with us at the time. She really took this on, and you can see in the middle there, it says step 2 purpose. The purpose of this project has been determined based on discussions with the research user group and the Cloudy champion. So we spoke to our patients, said, what is it that you think we should do in terms of communicating it? And they helped us develop this plan. And I'll show you now the video that we put together of participants around the country sending us short videos in response to the questions that they themselves had put together.
Hot, dry, damp, overcast, pressure. Great.
A change in the weather.
Very warm.
Raining. It came like an express train.
Household chores and gardening are out of the question. It's a horrible situation. Everything hurts and I feel like I'm running out of energy. I would be able to walk. The research really matters to me. It's necessary for everyone to be aware. Hopefully manage my pain a little bit better. To record 6 months of symptoms.
This could be extremely useful.
It might prove that I'm not imagining that my symptoms are worse.
Motion is lotion.
I think that taking part in research studies helps you gain a little more control over your condition. And if we could put sunshine in a bottle. Rosalie.
Roger.
Janet. Nora. Belinda. Karen versus arthritis.
So we were really grateful to all of those people for taking part. Then we were heading towards the results day. It was all the press release, put it under embargo. Thankfully, it happened on a half term because I kind of got a call a couple of days before the embargo saying, can you come to Wallasey for the day because we want to do some filming. So BBC Breakfast had come across the press release and been back in touch to say, well, we launched the study, we would like to feature it again, which was great for us. We had a funny thing where we had done a pre-record with the One Show who said, we want it to be exclusive. We also wanted to go back to BBC Breakfast. So we said, oh, no, we can't do an exclusive with the One Show. And it turns out, well, they did feature it, but they didn't have us on. Okay, so there's the filming. And then results day on Thursday. So I had to go into the BBC Breakfast studio in the morning. But as I was getting up that morning, the press release had obviously done the trick because we were in the BBC News app. We were the 8th story there. 2 above, tiger poacher who ate bear penises arrested. So it's obviously a news light day. Driving in, I listened to the Radio 4 and it was on the National News Bulletin. So that was great. And then we were in the studio and you can see Carolyn, who launched the study, was back there with me. And sorry for the slight video overdose, but I think it's quite useful to see this results video too.
BBC Breakfast launched an ambitious citizen science project with the University of Manchester to find out if there was a link between weather and pain.
We're asking people to track their symptoms using a smartphone app.
Pretty much moderate pain today.
After the BBC programme, we had 13,000 people join the study.
That's amazing, isn't it? And the results are in. Data from breakfast viewers has proven there is a link between weather and pain and exactly how that link works.
But this didn't have anything to do with weather.
Oh. What is it to do with that?
Well, we found that pain was associated with high humidity. Pain could also be higher if there were strong winds and if the pressure was low.
It's all about the pressure.
That's right. It's about those 3 things: high humidity, strong winds, and low pressure.
But basically, the old wives' tales that weather links to pain, absolutely true.
We found an association with our thousands of participants.
Some are more equipped to deal with the cold than others, but surprisingly, the studies show temperature wasn't a key factor when it came to pain. Pressure was. Dry days were least likely to be painful. Humid, damp, windy days most likely to be painful, increasing your chance of arthritic pain by 20%. You ever suffer from aches?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, from time to time.
Can anybody here tell when the weather's going to change because it's feeling in the joints? I normally feel it in my legs. If it weren't in particular weather.
Yes.
Mum used to say things like that, yeah, she could feel what the day was going to be like by her bones.
And you can tell her she's scientifically correct. Well, well done, Mum. What until now has been seen as folklore is in fact fact. Next science stop. Well, possibly the weather pane forecast coming to a screen near you. How soon?
Oops. And so that was then the results day, and then we had more interest subsequently. So there were a couple of dedicated World Service programs about it. We got into print media, so on the front page of the Express. This is probably my career highlight, where I was featured in Good Housekeeping magazine. And then just last month, it's still attracting attention around the world, and we got a New York Times article about it. But I think kind of it was an amazing study to be involved in. A lot of people contributing to it, so thanks to all of them. But I think it taught us an awful lot about patient and public involvement and engagement. And in our centre, we kind of led to us launching a centre-wide strategy that we really value, and people's patient and public involvement engagement has completely changed over the last 10 years in our centre. So all of our PhD students are doing this now, whereas previously they wouldn't, and they value it. We have dedicated PPI groups and various different programme grants and projects, and we're also supporting patients to do their own research. And this is a project called COVID Voices, which is where patients supported by our researchers have gone out, interviewed other people who had immune-mediated rheumatic disease, who were shielding, and their experiences of doing that, and they've done the analysis and presented the results as well. So hopefully I've given you a kind of an introduction to myself and the project, talk you through some of the PPI work that we've done through the course of the study. So I'd just like to acknowledge the funders and the many different people who've contributed. So thanks very much.